Hello everyone, welcome back to my system functional linguistics playlist. In the last video we discussed transitive PB system, a system insisting functional grammar to analyze the experiential meaning of the clauses. And in this video we will continue to the next system insisting functional grammar known as the mood system. This system is used to analyze the interpersonal meaning. But as you can see here, this is the part 1 because in systemic functional grammar we have at least 3 systems to analyze the interpersonal meaning. The other 2 systems are the modality system and the appraisal system, which will be discussed in the future videos, hopefully. So, in this video we will cover a couple of things. The first one, we will revisit very briefly the interpersonal metafunction. You can refer to the previous video, one of the videos that I have made about the metafunction in SFL. Okay, and then we will see the speech roles and the community being exchanged in the linguistic interaction, and then we continue to the speech functions, and then we will go to the mood system itself. We will start by looking at the clause elements and then the basic terms like the mood and residue, and then we will see the mood structure. And at the end of this video you will be presented with some examples of analysis of interpersonal meaning. So let's begin. Okay, as we have discussed in the previous videos, especially in the first video, when I introduced to you the systemic functional linguistics, uh, we say that systemic functional linguistics sees the language as a metafunctional or multifunctional. Language is not only used to or as a means to express ideas, but also to interact with other people. The interpersonal metafunction highlights the function of language to enact a relationship or the interaction between the interactants. Or the interactants here can be the speaker and the listener, or the writer and the reader. And by doing so, they create what we call interpersonal meaning. In systemic functional linguistics, an interpersonal meaning covers two main areas. The second one is the type of interaction, or what we call speech roles, which consists of two types. The first one is giving, and the second one is demanding. And the second area of interpersonal meaning is the commodity being exchanged in the interaction or through the interaction, which are in this case covers the information or goods and services. We will look at these commodities in the next slide. But basically, we can understand that interpersonal meaning highlights the types of interaction, whether it is a giving, whether it gives information or goods and services, or demanding information or demanding goods and services. And this interpersonal meaning is analyzed in detail in the mood system. Okay. Now we see the speech roles and commodity in mood system or in system functional linguistics in general. So there are two roles that language plays in terms of the interaction. The first one is giving, which we can define or understand as presenting or providing a commodity, and or demanding, that we can understand as asking or requiring a commodity. So commodity is what is being exchanged through the linguistic interaction, and systemic functional linguist uh, draws two types of commodity. The first one is information, which is anything that can be realized through language, and the second one is goods and services, which are anything that can be realized through actions. Okay, so in this case, we can understand that language is not only used to uh, exchange information but also to get things done, right? Now we can take a look at the examples here. A short discussion between a policeman and uh, a girl named Amaya. What is your name? My name is Amaya. License and ID, please. Here they are. And then handing over the documents. So if we look at this interaction, we can see that the first sentence or utterance or clause, it can be say so, is the interaction type is demanding the information. Okay, so the policeman initiate the interaction by asking names. Okay, and then Amaya uh, responded, "My name is Amaya," which in this case the speech role is giving and the commodity is information, because uh, name is basically a word, something that can be realized through language. Okay, and then the conversation continues where the policeman said, ask, uh, ask her to show her driving license and ID card. Okay, so uh, in this clause or sentence, you can say that, if you like, demands not information but goods and services, something that the interactions must do, not say. Okay, and then the response that Amaya gives to the policeman is handing over the documents, although it is accompanied with uh, an expression here. Here they are. Okay, so the last the last utterance or sentence uh, has the speech role as giving, but it gives uh, goods and services, actions. Okay, not information. So these are the speech roles and commodity that we will uh, revisit when we talk about the mood system itself. Now we go to the speech functions and clause types. So the speech roles are realized through functions and also clause types. For example, uh, question. Okay? Question asks for information. So this is uh, a demanding role, okay, of the speech. And question is typically realized as an interrogative clause, whether it is a yes/no question or the WH question. And then the statement. The statement gives information, okay, and is typically realized as a declarative clause. Command demands an action, asking someone to do something, and is typically realized as an imperative clause, but other forms are also possible. For example, we can express a commands, uh, soft commands or polite commands by using interrogative clauses. And then the last one is over. An overing gives something. Okay, it can be used to express willingness to provide an action or item that can be realized as either declaratives or interrogatives. So in the mood system, there are four speech functions: the question and statements, commands, and over. Question and statements are for exchanging information, where question demands information and statement gives the information. Meanwhile, the command and over exchange goods and services. Okay, where command demands a good and service, while an over uh, gives uh, goods and service. And they are realized through what we call interrogative clause, declarative clause, imperative clause. Okay, so we can say that there are three clause types in the mood system. They are interrogative, declarative, and imperative clauses. Alright, now we come to the mood system. First, we need to look at the clause elements, because in analyzing the mood in the clause, or when we analyze the interpersonal meaning, we need to identify the elements, because the combination of the elements create the particular blocks in the uh, in the system. Okay, the first one is the subject. Subject is typically a nominal group in the clause that the finite makes responsible for the validity of the clause. Okay, so the meaning of responsible here is not moral responsibility, but the entity in the clause that holds the validity of the clause, the proposition or the proposal. Halliday uses these two words. Proposition means, yeah, the content, the value of clause. Okay, the proposition is the term used to what? To refer to the value or the content of information clause, whether it is asking or demanding information. Meanwhile, proposal actually has the same meaning with proposition, but the term proposal is used when the community is not information but goods and services. And then finite. Finite is the verbal operator, uh, which part of the verbal group, okay, in the clause. that anchors the clause in tense, modality, and polarity. Okay, so uh, the finite we have discussed this in the last video, especially when we talk about the rank scale and clause boundary, if I am not mistaken. Okay, so the finite is the verbal group or the verb element in the clause that is influenced by tense and the number. But here we only focus on the tense, modality, and polarity. So the tense here includes the three primary tenses like the past, present, and future tense. And why they are important in the mood system, Halliday says that the validity of the clause, the validity of the the content of the clause needs to be as related to the here and now. Okay? And then the modality, uh, yeah, modality will be discussed uh, in the modality system. But what I can tell you now is that the modality expresses the speaker judgment. It is divided into two main types, including what we call uh, probability or certainty, and then the inclination or obligation. Uh, the terms used in SFL are uh, epistemic modality and deontic modality, but we will talk about it in other videos. And polarity is simply whether the finite is in the positive form or negative form. And then the predicator is the main part of the verbal group if not fused with the finite. Okay, so some clause or some predicator may have the finite separated from the predicator, like this example has provided. All right, so we have the finite and the predicator separate. But in this one, the finite and the predicator are fused, okay, together, provided the tense here is past tense, which is realized through the same word. Okay. Meanwhile, in this example, the element that anchors the tense is separate. Okay. Okay. And then the complement. Complement is the nominal elements or nominal group in the clause that complete the meaning. And complement can become subject when the clause is restructured, for example, from an active clause into a passive clause. And then adjunct in experiential meaning or in the transitivity system, we can consider adjunct as the circumstance. Okay, so what the adjunct does in the clause is that it provides additional information about time, manner, cause, extent, degree, and so on and so forth. Okay, now we can look at these examples. We have two almost similar clauses. Okay, the, but the first one has the finite and the predicator separated. Meanwhile, the second clause has the predicator fused with the finite. We can see that the teacher is the subject. It is a nominal group, and then has is the finite. Provided is the predicator. Students the complement one because this um, this clause, this clause requires two complements because the verb provide here requires two two objects. If we use traditional grammar term, we will call this one polytransitive verb. Okay, so provided students with feedback. Okay, if this doesn't exist, then the clause is invalid because the teacher has provided students today will uh, result in a question what is provided. Okay, so with feedback here, although it has a propositional, it doesn't function as a prepositional phrase but a nominal group. Okay, and then today is an adjunct. It is a adjunct of time or the circumstance of time. Alright, the next clause is similar, but as I told you before, that the finite and the predicator uh, are realized by the same word, the same verbal group. Okay, the teacher is still the subject, and then the provided, the word provided here is both the finite and the predicator, and the rest of the clause uh, are just the same with the previous one. Okay, so uh, after this, I hope that you have understood the clause elements, especially when we work with the mood system. Alright, and now the basic terms. Of course, the first one we need to understand is the term mood itself. Alright, mood is the element in the clause that determines the clause type. Okay, the clause type, whether it is a declarative, interrogative, or imperative. Okay, that is the mood. Hence, the speech functions. Because the clause type has been determined, we can also identify the speech function, whether it is an over or a command or a question or a statement, right? So we identify or we use the mood block, we call it a mood block, we will see later, to identify the speech function, okay? To identify the type of interaction uh, realized through the clause, okay? So it is said here that it helps manage speech roles, whether it is giving or demanding, negotiate information or goods and services, the commodity, if you still remember, and express the speaker's stance through tense, modality, and polarity. You may be wondering why the speaker's stance can be expressed through the tense. Okay, imagine that I say something in the present tense, then you can assume that the content, the value of the clause is still true at the time of speaking. Okay, but if I use past tense, it could be that the truth value of the clause uh, is invalid or expired, for example, like that. Okay, and so on and so forth. Modality will be discussed in the other videos, hopefully, and in polarity, whether I use a positive or negative polarity. Okay, and then the second block in the clause is called residue. The residue is the part of the clause that follows the mood, okay, after the mood. But as we will see later, the structure does not always follow the what we call here. Sometimes the mode the mode block is between the residue blocks, okay? Parts of the residue blocks. So what the residue does is that it carries the remaining experiential and the propositional content of the message of the clause. So residue, the content of the residue uh, is rarely analyzed in terms of the interpersonal meaning because it is more associated with experiential meaning. But it doesn't mean that it is not important. It is still important because, as we have known, that a clause has or a clause uh, conveys uh, three meanings simultaneously: experiential, interpersonal, and textual meanings. That's the mood system. Okay. Now we look at the mood structure. So we have the mood block, which consists of the subject and final. Okay. So when we want to identify whether a clause is a statement, question, command, or offer, we need to look at the mood block. Okay. We need to look at the structure of the subject and the final, including fused final, modality, and polarity. Okay. For example, the statement like the teacher can, the teacher cannot, the teacher provided. Okay? These are just examples, but these examples have the similarity in terms of the mode structure. That is, the subject comes first and then followed by the final. Okay, subject final. Like this, the teacher as a subject can is the final. The teacher cannot, the teacher subject cannot is the final. The teacher provided just the same. Okay, but in question we have two patterns depends on mm, the type of the questions. If it is a yes/no question, the structure will be the finite comes first and then followed by the subject, like can the teacher, can the teacher not, did the teacher, okay, especially with this, like can the teacher not, can the teacher not provide students with blah blah blah, for example, like that. This is how the modern English use or put the negator not when when the clause is a yes no question clause. Okay, and then the second the second one is the WH question. There are two patterns under this question type. The first one is the WH as the subject plus finite, like who gave or what can, who gave the feedback. Okay, what can the teacher do, like that. Okay, so uh, here the WH uh, like who or what are the subjects of the clause. Uh, Meanwhile, the second pattern uh, has the WH element not as the subject but as the complement or adjunct, and then followed by the finite and the subject. Like these examples. Why does the teacher provide feedback on students' writing? For example, here the word the WHY here functions not as a subject but as a complement or adjunct. Okay, the second clause is just the same. How does the teacher blah blah blah. Here the finite is does and the subject is the teacher, and this one is the same. Okay, all right. And then command. Okay. In command, we usually use imperative uh, clause, and in the imperative clause, the subject is typically omitted. Okay. Also, the finite is typically omitted unless verb like do, don't, or modal finite. When they are added into the clause, then yeah, they are not omitted. Also, the verb is in the base form. Okay, and there are two patterns here, as you can see. The first one just begins with the predicator, like give me the book or provide feedback to students. Those clauses are commands. Okay, and the second pattern, especially when we use do and don't, like to command, to ask, to tell someone to do something or not to do something. Okay? So like do give students feedback. It's like to give an emphasis to the command. Okay? Or don't provide students with false feedback, something like that. But uh, most often we use interrogative clause to express commands. For example, when we want to sound polite, or we are polite actually when we use interrogative clause uh, to deliver a command. Okay, like would you provide your students with feedback, with immediate feedback, for example? That is also a command or a request. Okay, and then an over. Over can be An over can be realized through a declarative or integrative clauses. Okay, like if we use the declarative clause, the pattern or the structure is like this: the subject and then the final. Like I can provide you with corrective feedback, immediate feedback, or we will provide you with the personalized feedback. Like that. That is an over. Okay, or the interrogative. But the interrogative clause, when it is used to express an overing, it doesn't um, demand uh, goods and services, but it gives it gives goods and service. Like, can I provide you with feedback? Can I comment on your uh, text, for example? Yeah? Would you like to have some books to read this morning? That is an over. Okay, although in response the listener may say yes, I love to, but it is an over. Why it is an over? Because systemic functional linguistics focus on the meaning of the language. Okay, so and the function of the clause, because the function is not to to demand or to obtain a linguistic response, but it is an over. Then the interrogative is not always a question. We can say like that. Okay. All right, and then we come to some examples of analysis. Okay, first we can see here that the nominal group, the subject can be an embedded clause which functions as a nominal group. Just take a look uh, at my video about the rank scale to understand what the nominal group is. And as you can see here, the mode block consists of two elements, that is, they are the subject and the finite. And the finite here uh, is appended with a negative sign because there is a negator, because does not is a negative form of the verbal group. Okay, and the tense is the present, is present. Okay, affecting here, affect is a verbal group. It is a part of the verb does not. Okay, but affect in this case is not included into the mood block but in the residue block because it functions as a predicator, not a finite. Okay, and then me is another nominal group which functions as a complement and becomes a part of the residue. Okay, in the rest of the examples, I will use NG, which stands for nominal group, verbal group. Okay, here we can see that the students were writing what the students here is the subject, where is the finite, positive and past tense, and these two elements uh, are inside the mood block. Okay, then while writing is the residue because there are no complements, no adjuncts, just predicators. So the residue block consists only this element. Right? But here we have mood tag. In traditional grammar, we refer to this as the question tag. Okay? But in the mood system, we call it the mood tag. The mood tag is just like the mood. Okay? So we need to identify the subject and the finite. Okay? And the rules of the question tag still applies in the mood tag. Like if the finite in the clause is a positive and then the finite in the mood tag block is negative. Okay. So uh, what is the speech function of the first clause? Whether you come or not doesn't affect me. So this is a statement. It gives information. Okay, because the mood structure is subject comes first and then followed by finite, just like this subject then finite. So this means that these students were writing is also a statement. Okay, so both are statements, which means that both gives information. Okay, they are not over. All right, the next one is like this. They are fantastic, the students. Okay, uh, we will deal with such a clause in many sources, many texts, where the subject is postposed. Yeah, is postposed. So in this example, the residue is between the mode blocks. Okay, So they are here, the subject and finite are part of the mood block, and the student here, because it is the subject, is also part of the mood block. Okay, so I want you to pay attention how we write, how we label them. Okay, so mode like this, then a hyphen, and then od. Okay, begins with a hyphen like this. Sub and jet. Okay, here fantastic is an adjective group. Okay, function is the complement of the uh, clause. All right, and just like the other the previous examples, these are also statement. Okay, all right. Now this is obviously question. Okay, because the structure begins by a finite and then followed by a subject. Okay, did you usually provide students with feedback? Okay, this is example. We can see question mark here. Okay, so we can look at the mood block, which consists of the finite and the subject. So it is different from this one where the subject comes first and then is followed by the finite. The view usually finite and then subject. And here the adverbial group usually function as the adjunct, which is part of the residual block, and then predicator, complements, and complements. Okay, so just focus on the mode structure. Okay, the mode block. So we can identify the speech function whether it is a statement or question by looking at the structure of the finite and the subject. If the subject comes first, then it is a statement. If the finite comes first, then it is a question. And this one is a question. Okay, it is not a command. Alright, now we look at these ones. Can you not provide students with feedback? Okay, so we can take a look at the mode block here. The structure is the finite, in this case is the finite model, and the subject followed by a polarity or a negator. Okay, to to define the polarity of the clause as a negative clause. Okay? So it begins with the finite and the subject, and followed by the subject, which means that this also a question. Okay, it's also a question. But if the not here, the negator here, if the negator here is omitted, then it will become a soft command. Can you provide students with feedback? Is actually a polite command. Okay, and then the next one. Would you like some books? This is an over. Okay, because the speaker wants to uh, over some books to the listener. Okay, the structure is just like an interrogative or question, similar because the structure begins with the finite and then followed by the subject. And also just remember how we put the polarity and the tense. Okay. All right. This is obviously an over. Okay. Here are some books. Okay, for you. Here, the word here is the propositional phrase function as an adjunct. and because it is an adjunct, it becomes a part of the residue, not the mood block. Okay. Meanwhile, the mood block consists of the finite and the subject. Okay. And then for you is another adverbial group functioning as a adjunct and is part of the residue block. So you can see here the mood is between the parts of the residue block. Okay, I think these are three last examples. How did you usually provide feedback to students? Okay, this is obviously a question, but as you can see here, the WH question, the word how here function as an adjunct. Okay, and because it is an adjunct, it is part of the residue. Meanwhile, did you uh, are the components of the mood block. Okay, and because this is an example, it begins with the finite and then followed by the subject. Okay, and then the rest of the clause uh, combines with the adjunct here uh, is the residue block. Okay, the content of the or the elements of the in the residue block. And this one is a question and it demands information. Okay, how did you usually provide feedback to students? The response uh, it can be expressed through or typically expressed through language, not actions. Okay. Similarly, this one, how is feedback usually provided? Here, the WH word still functions as a chance, and therefore it becomes part of the residue block. Is feedback are the elements of the mood block. Okay, and the rest, the adjuncts and the predicators are part of the residue block. This is also questions demanding information, and also the last one, who usually provides the field. Okay, here the WH word, the who, doesn't function as the adjunct but as the subject. Okay, so who becomes part of the mood block. Okay, who provides? It provides here is the finite. Okay, and here if you can see, uh, there is no pronoun as subject like here you. Okay, because that is the content of the question. Okay, the who. Okay, who usually provides which ask information or demands information about the person who provides the feedback to students. Okay, I hope that this is clear to you. Okay, so uh, that's all about the mood system. I hope that we can learn something from this video, and I hope that by by looking at the examples, we can have a big picture about uh, how the mood system looks like and how we can analyze the interpersonal mood, the types of interaction and the commodity being exchanged uh, through the clause by using the mood system. But as I said at the beginning of the video, uh, the personal meaning also covers uh, two other systems, the modality systems and the appraisal systems, which show that the interpersonal meaning in SFL is not this simple. Okay, interpersonal meaning is not limited only to the types of interaction and the commodity being exchanged through the interactions. It covers broader and deeper areas of the interaction. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video, hopefully. Bye.